Recognizes the gentleman from New Mexico, Mr. Pearce, for 5 minutes.
Speaker, request unanimous consent to revise and extend.
Gentleman's recognized.
Words are very powerful, and words are important. I hear the words from our president and realize that he understands the importance of words also. In the past, he's talked about debt, borrowing, and spending, but now he talks about obligations because he understands that debt to the American public is a four-letter word. He doesn't want to be tagged with the fact he's asking for more debt. So now it's obligations. That's a word that has cleaned up the concept that we're simply borrowing against our future. But even the word borrowing needs to be looked at, because that assumes that we have the credit to borrow with. And the truth is, no nation can lend us the kind of deficits that we're running right now, so we're actually printing the money. But even the word printing has been changed in Washington. Now it's quantitative easing. It just sounds so much better. Printing sounds so crass to the American public, who might be worried about what's happening to their savings accounts while Washington is printing money. The word negotiation is a word that the president is familiar with. He did it 2 years ago when we reached this exact same point. Both sides came to the table and negotiated, and we wound up with a budget that was not as extremely overdrawn as we had faced before. That's the power of negotiations. But now the word negotiation is taken out of the president's vocabulary, and he declares that he's being held hostage. Oh, really? This thing he calls being held hostage is actually the American way. It's what our founding fathers wanted. They came here and set up a system with a president and two houses of Congress and two different parties. And those parties would sometimes have all the power, and sometimes they would share the power. This president says he's being held hostage by the system. That means he doesn't believe in the balance of powers that the electorate cast in the last election. He declares over and over that the election is done, I was elected. The same people that elected him chose to put Republicans in power in the House of Representatives. I think they did that because they were afraid of this debt, deficit, borrowing, and spending. We're told that we should have a clean CR. There's nothing clean about sacrificing the future of our children and grandchildren. That's what the president wants, a CR where he can spend what he wants to spend without negotiations on anything. We actually in the House submitted 4 different plans before this shutdown occurred. Those plans were just summarily rejected by the Senate, waved off, not really even considered. And yet we find our friends declaring this to be the Republican shutdown. Not that both houses failed to come to an agreement and the White House failed to sit down and negotiate. They just weren't going to be held hostage. So now then we need a clean CR, according to some, and we need to stop this Republican shutdown. Words are very powerful. No longer do we talk about spending in Washington. We talk about investing. We're investing the Americans' public's money. We're investing it in things like studies of the sexual habits of the fruit fly in Tijuana or wherever. Debt is indeed a 4-letter word. We're finally led to believe that default will occur immediately, that we somehow won't pay our obligations. But the American people need to understand that they are still paying their taxes every day, and those taxes come to Washington. That's about $2.5 trillion a year. If we do not extend the debt ceiling any higher, then what Washington is going to have to do is it's going to have to prioritize. It's going to decide which of its expenses to pay. The Constitution demands that we pay our obligations. It says we can't default on those. Washington would have to do the same thing every American family does. It will have to prioritize its expenses if we do not extend the debt ceiling, so chaos will not reign. We simply have to live within our means. That's what every American family has to do. I yield back.